me ask you a question.
Yeah.
And, I want you to really, truly think about this before you answer.
Okay, I'm listening.
If the devil himself, like the actual devil in the flesh, with a knowing, charismatic smile, walked up to you right now and offered you absolutely everything you ever wanted.
Everything.
Everything. I'm talking infinite knowledge, eternal youth, intoxicating world-stopping romance, the limitless power to bend reality, politics, and wealth entirely to your will.
Wow.
Every single experience you've ever missed, every door that is currently closed to you, blown wide open. In exchange, he just wants one thing, your soul. But only after you die. Until then, the universe is your absolute playground.
Right.
Would you take the deal?
It is the ultimate hypothetical. And human nature dictates that most of us would immediately, reflexively claim the moral high ground and say, no, of course not, I would never.
Yeah, I'd usually be right there with you making that exact same quick denial. But let's push on that for a second. Think about all those unanswered questions that keep you awake at night. Think about the youth that is quietly, inevitably slipping through your fingers right now.
Mm-hmm.
The places you haven't seen, the lives you haven't lived. Think about that tiny, persistent voice that whispers to you in the dark, asking, is this it? Is this all I'm going to get out of this short time on Earth?
And when you really sit with that feeling of lack, of missing out,
are you still so completely sure of your answer?
That hesitation you might be feeling right now, that is the very core of what we are unpacking today.
Because this isn't just a fun thought experiment for a dinner party. This is the exact premise posed by the German writer Johann Wolfgang von Goethe over 200 years ago. Today, we are taking everything written, debated, and analyzed about his monumental, breathtaking masterpiece, Faust, and distilling it into a journey you can actually use. We're going to explore this massive, two-part poetic epic, not as some dusty, unapproachable academic text, but as a mirror held up directly to modern human ambition. It asks the exact same questions that define our lives, our careers, our technology, and our anxieties today.
It really is a cathedral of a story. To even begin to understand the sheer gravity of it, we have to look at the scale of Goethe's undertaking.
Yeah, he didn't exactly rush this one out.
Not at all. He didn't just sit down and write this over a prolific summer retreat. He started working on Faust when he was in his 20s as a fiery young poet. And he didn't finish it until he was in his 80s, just before his death.
Which is wild to think about. That is roughly 60 years of his life poured into one single narrative.
Exactly.
Which means the text itself is almost like a geological record of his mind. Every heartbreak, every philosophical revelation, everything he learned as a scientist, a statesman, a theater director, it all got folded into this one protagonist. But what's really fascinating to me is that Goethe didn't invent the character of Faust from scratch.
Far from it, actually. He was working with a myth that was already centuries old. There was a real historical figure named Johann Georg Faust in the early 16th century.
Wait, really? A real guy?
A real guy. He was a traveling alchemist, an astrologer, and, well, by most accounts, a bit of a con artist who claimed to have magical powers. After he died, supposedly in an explosive alchemy accident.
Ouch.
Right. But after that, the popular imagination spun this wild legend that he had sold his soul to the devil for dark knowledge, and the devil eventually came and tore him limb from limb.
So the original stories, like the English playwright Christopher Marlowe's Tragedy of Dr. Faustus from 1592, they use this as a very straightforward, terrifying Christian warning.
Yes.
Do not defy God. Do not seek forbidden knowledge. If you reach too high, you will be damned to hell for eternity.
But Goethe takes that raw material and completely flips the script. He liberates the story from strict, punitive theology. He decides he's not going to write a cautionary tale about sin and punishment.
He's going in a totally different direction.
He's going to write a story about the relentless, agonizing, uniquely human desire for experience. And his ultimate radical departure from the original myth is his decision that he is going to try to save Faust's soul.
To set that up, the story actually begins far away from Earth. We start in heaven, in a scene that heavily echoes the Book of Job. Mephistopheles, the devil, stands before God and makes a brazen bet.
He wagers that he can corrupt this restless, tormented humanist scholar named Faust.
He basically says, let me lead him my way, let me give him what he wants, and I'll prove he's no better than an animal.
And God just calmly accepts the bet. He utters a line that becomes the thesis for the entire epic. He says, man errs as long as he strives.
Man errs as long as he strives.
Yes. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, this prologue totally reframes the entire universe of the story. Faust isn't just a guy facing a localized temptation. He becomes a cosmic battleground for what it even means to fall.
Right.
God isn't looking for static perfection. The divine perspective here acknowledges that trying, striving, and pushing forward inherently means making mistakes.
So from there, we drop down from the shining courts of heaven straight into a dark, dusty, claustrophobic Gothic study. And here we meet Dr. Heinrich Faust.
Our protagonist.
He is an aging man who has mastered everything his society has to offer. He has ultimate degrees in philosophy, law, medicine, and theology. He knows all the theories.
But he's miserable.
He is drowning in a profound, suffocating despair because he feels he knows absolutely nothing of actual value.
The despair here is heavy because it isn't the despair of a failure. It is the despair of someone who's succeeded perfectly at the wrong things.
Yeah.
He realizes that academic knowledge is just a hollow shell if it isn't paired with actual lived experience. He knows the chemical composition of wine, but he hasn't been drunk on the pure joy of living. He knows the cartography of the world, but he hasn't walked barefoot on the grass.
He is so repulsed by his own shadow of an existence living among test tubes and moldy books that he literally raises a vial of poison to his lips. He is right on the brink of ending it all.
It's incredibly dark.
But he is stopped at the very last second by the sound of Easter bells ringing outside, reminding him of his childhood faith and the vibrancy of life. He survives the night, but that agonizing hunger for meaning doesn't go away. And that is when the devil enters.
And he enters in a very peculiar, almost comical way. Faust is out on a walk with his incredibly dry, boring academic assistant, Wagner, when a black poodle starts aggressively following them.
A poodle?
A poodle. The dog follows Faust all the way home. Once they are locked in the study, the dog begins to physically transform, expanding and shifting like a dark cloud, until out steps an elegant, witty, sharply dressed traveling scholar.
And he introduces himself with one of the most famous lines in literature. He says he is part of that power which always wills evil and always works good.
This is Mephistopheles.
He doesn't show up with horns and a pitchfork. He shows up as a smooth, cynical, deeply philosophical conversationalist.
He offers Faust the ultimate, irresistible deal. He tells him, I will be your servant in this life. I will give you anything you want, take you anywhere, let you feel everything. In return, you will be my servant in the afterlife.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Faust doesn't just sign a standard demonic contract. He turns the whole thing into a massive philosophical wager.
Oh.
He looks at Mephistopheles and tells him, you don't understand human nature. I will never be satisfied. Faust sets a very specific, dangerous condition. He says, if there is ever a moment, a single fleeting moment where I am so perfectly happy and deeply satisfied that I say to that moment, stay, thou art so fair, then and only then you can put me in chains. Then I will accept my doom.
It is a breathtaking gamble. Faust is not betting on his actions. He is betting on his own internal emotional state. He is wagering his eternal soul on the arrogant belief that his hunger for life is entirely insatiable.
That he will never, ever reach a point where he wants to stop seeking. To Faust, stopping is death.
And Mephistopheles, being incredibly confident in his ability to corrupt, accepts the terms.
The ink dries, signed in blood, of course, and we launch into part one. Mephistopheles' first strategic move is to take Faust to a witch's kitchen. Faust drinks a potion that completely restores his youth.
A fresh start.
He transforms from this tired, bitter old academic into a vibrant, handsome young man fueled by decades of repressed desire. And Mephistopheles warns him, with this potion in your veins, you're going to see Helen of Troy in every woman you meet.
And the tragedy begins almost immediately, because the very first person Faust sets his sights on is a young girl named Gretchen. She is 14 years old. She is pure, deeply religious, simple, and entirely innocent of the cynical, educated world Faust comes from. She represents everything he has been missing.
Faust is just intoxicated by her innocence. He has all this pent-up, selfish, embodied hunger, and he just unleashes it on her. With the devil's infinite resources, he leaves her expensive jewelry in her closet. He arranges manipulative chance meetings.
And Gretchen, who has never experienced anything like this, falls deeply in love with him.
But we have to understand her character. Her fall is not a failure of her morality. It is a failure of trust. She believes Faust is a good, noble man.
However, Gretchen possesses something Faust entirely lacks: a profound moral intuition. There's a deeply significant scene So famous in German culture, it actually has its own term, the Gretchenfrage, or Gretchen's question.
What exactly is the Gretchenfrage? How does she confront him?
She looks at this sophisticated, wealthy man and intuitively senses a void. She asks him point blank about his religion and his core beliefs. She is essentially asking, where do you stand morally?
And Faust.
Faust gives a very evasive philosophical non-answer about how God is just a feeling. But more importantly, Gretchen senses the radiating physical evil of his companion, Mephistopheles. She tells Faust that whenever that man is in the room, her soul shrinks. She literally shudders in the devil's presence.
Her instincts are screaming at her. But her love for Faust overrides her intuition, and the fallout is an absolute devastating domino effect. It is a masterclass in watching someone's selfish ambition destroy everyone around them.
It really is.
Faust wants to spend the night with her, so he gives her a sleeping potion to give to her strict mother. But the potion is too strong, and it poisons the mother to death. Gretchen gets pregnant out of wedlock, which in that society means absolute ruin.
But it gets worse. Her brother, a proud soldier named Valentin, finds out his sister's reputation has been destroyed. He challenges Faust to a duel in the street. With Mephistopheles guiding his blade, Faust strikes Valentin down.
It's just tragedy after tragedy.
As Valentin dies bleeding in the dirt, he publicly curses Gretchen as a harlot in front of the entire gathering town. Faust, to avoid arrest, flees the city, leaving her completely alone.
She loses her mother, her brother, her reputation, and her lover in a matter of days. Driven completely mad by the isolating grief and the unbearable shame, Gretchen gives birth in secret. And in a fit of absolute terrifying despair, she drowns her own baby in a pond.
Which is horrific.
She is discovered, arrested, and sentenced to be executed.
Faust finally discovers what has happened and forces Mephistopheles to take him to the prison to break her out. He finds her in a dark, freezing cell, completely lost in madness. He begs her to run away with him. The cell door is open. The devil is literally waiting outside with the horses.
But Gretchen recognizes the devil in the shadows, and she refuses to go. This is the agonizing climax of part 1. I want to slow down here because the emotional weight is staggering.
Yeah.
Gretchen looks at the man she loves. She looks at the dark power offering her freedom and life, and she says no. She refuses to owe her continued existence to the devil. Instead, she throws herself entirely on the judgment and mercy of God.
Mephistopheles coldly declares she is condemned. But immediately, contradicting him, a voice from heaven rings out, she is saved.
It's an incredibly powerful moment of redemption for her. But it is also a brutal reality check that Goethe is presenting to you, the reader. Faust gets to walk away. He escapes. While pure, fragile innocence pays the absolute highest price when it collides with the reckless ambition of the powerful.
Precisely. And that concludes part 1. Now, if the story ended there, it would be a phenomenal, devastating, deeply human tragedy. It would be a masterpiece on its own.
But it doesn't end there.
No. Remember, Goethe spent decades writing part 2, and the shift in scope is monumental. We move from the micro-tragedy of one girl in a small village to the macro-tragedy of society, economics, history, and myth.
Okay, let's unpack this, because part 2, which wasn't even published until after Goethe died, is a wild, hallucinatory ride. We leave grounded reality completely behind and blast off into this bizarre journey.
The expansion is massive. Faust and Mephistopheles travel to the court of the Roman emperor. The empire is completely bankrupt, the treasury is empty, and society is on the verge of collapse. So what does the devil do to solve the financial crisis? He invents paper money.
Wait, the devil invents paper money? That sounds like a bizarre punchline for a 19th century poem. How does a macroeconomic policy fit into a story about a guy betting his soul?
It is a brilliant critique of fiat currency. Mephistopheles tells the emperor, look, there is gold buried all over your empire that technically belongs to you. We don't need to dig it up. Let's just print paper notes based on the promise of that unmined gold. Wow. It creates an instant massive economic boom. Everyone is suddenly rich. But it's an economy based entirely on imaginary wealth, empty promises, and deferred debt. It is Goethe warning us that modern finance itself is a kind of Faustian bargain. We get the immediate gratification of wealth by mortgaging the future.
That is shockingly modern. It's the birth of modern debt as a demonic invention. And from there, it only gets more surreal. They don't just travel through space, they travel through time.
Yes. Faust travels back to ancient Greece. He actually meets, courts, and marries the real Helen of Troy.
Again, why Helen? Out of all the figures in mythology, why does Faust need to marry her?
Helen represents the absolute pinnacle of classical antiquity order, ideal beauty, and restraint. Faust represents the modern, restless, boundless, romantic spirit. Their marriage is Goethe's attempt to synthesize these two massive cultural eras.
That's ambitious.
They even have a son named Euphorion, who represents the volatile spirit of poetry. Euphorion is so filled with striving that he tries to fly too high, falls from the sky, and dies, a direct tribute Goethe wrote for the poet Lord Byron, who had recently died.
Goethe wrote this knowing it was basically impossible theater. You've got oceans appearing out of nowhere, mountains shifting, mythological beasts, emperors, and angels. It was meant for the theater of the mind. Though, bless them, directors have tried to physically stage it. Peter Stein famously directed a production of the entire uncut text, and it ran for 21 hours straight.
It demands an encyclopedic knowledge of history and myth to fully grasp every reference. But through all the madness of Part 2, the core narrative thread of Faust's endless, restless striving remains constant. Which brings us finally to the last act of his life.
We skip ahead, and Faust is now a very old man. He is blind. He's no longer chasing romance or time traveling to meet mythological queens. He has turned his ambition toward a massive engineering project.
He's trying to reclaim land from the sea.
Right. Holding back the ocean tides to build a literal utopia, a free society where humanity can thrive and work together. He hears the sound of shovels digging in the distance, and he is overcome with joy, thinking it's his workers building this grand project.
But in a cruel, deeply ironic twist, it isn't his workers. Mephistopheles has ordered a crew of demons to dig Faust's grave.
But Faust is blind. He doesn't know that. In his delusion, standing on the edge of his own grave, he believes he has finally secured a perfect, free future for millions of people. And in that massive surge of profound satisfaction, he finally says the fatal words, "Stay, thou art so fair."
The contract is fulfilled. The absolute second he feels complete satisfaction, he drops dead into the grave. Mephistopheles steps up, fully expecting to claim the soul he has spent a lifetime and countless resources working for. The devil thinks he's won.
But he hasn't, because a choir of angels swoops down from heaven, distracting the demons by raining down rose petals that brew them like fire, and they grab Faust's immortal soul, carrying it up to the sky. They declare, "He who strives on and lives to strive can earn redemption still."
And who is waiting for him up there in the highest spheres of heaven? Gretchen's soul. She is ready to guide him upward into the light.
It's beautiful.
The entire epic ends with one of the most debated lines in literature. The eternal feminine draws us upward.
We need to decode that. When he says the eternal feminine, he isn't just talking about gender, right?
Exactly. He's talking about a universal principle of pure, selfless, nurturing, and forgiving love embodied perfectly by Gretchen. This stands in direct opposition to Faust's masculine, selfish, conquering drive. It is grace that ultimately saves him, not his own achievements. But what's fascinating here is a massive moral controversy this ending has sparked for 2 centuries.
I can completely see why. Let's look at the collateral damage for a second. Faust left a trail of utter destruction in his wake. He is directly or indirectly responsible for the deaths of Gretchen, her mother, her brother, her child, his own mythical son, and countless innocent people who were displaced or killed during his grand engineering projects in Part 2. Yet at the end of the day, he gets saved.
It forces us to question Goethe's immense leniency toward his protagonist. Does the sheer act of striving really excuse murder and ruin? Is Gretchen unfairly reduced to a mere vehicle for his salvation after he destroyed her earthly life? It is a deeply uncomfortable conclusion if you are looking for traditional black and white justice.
So what does this all mean? How does a 200-year-old German play about a guy making a bet with the devil connect to you listening to this right now?
It connects because Goethe is proposing an entirely different framework for how to evaluate a human life. Traditional religious morality is based on adherence. Follow the rules, do not sin, stay pure, do no harm, and you are saved.
But Goethe shatters that paradigm.
He argues that striving, the relentless, messy, often destructive process of trying, failing, making mistakes, and reaching for more, is the ultimate human good. Even when you cause harm, pushing forward is fundamentally better than stagnation.
It's the idea that settling into a complacent slumber is the only real sin.
Consider the nature of evil in this framework. Mephistopheles describes himself as the spirit of Noah. He is pure negation. He wants to destroy, to prove that human effort is meaningless. But by constantly putting obstacles in Faust's way, by constantly tempting him and forcing him to react, the devil inadvertently acts as the engine of human evolution. Every time Faust faces the devil's challenges, he is forced to grow. The friction of evil is required for the spark of human progress.
The friction of evil is required for progress. That is a heavy concept to carry around.
We can zoom out even further to see how this applies to us collectively. In the early 20th century, the historian Oswald Spengler argued that all of Western civilization is fundamentally a Faustian civilization.
What did he mean by that?
He meant that our entire culture is defined by an absolute obsession with the infinite. You see it in our invention of calculus, in the perspective painting of the Renaissance that draws the eye to an infinite horizon, in our relentless strive to master nature through technology, and unfortunately, in the brutal history of global colonialism. It is a civilization defined by the mindset that there is always more to know, more to conquer, and that progress is always worth the terrifying human cost.
And that brings it right into our living rooms and into our pockets, because you live in a Faustian world every single day. We make these bargains constantly without even a second thought. We trade our deeply personal data, our privacy, and our psychological profiles to massive tech monopolies in exchange for the immediate convenience of free navigation and instant communication.
It's so true.
We trade our mental health and our attention spans for the dopamine hit of endless algorithmic screen time. We trade the long-term stability of our global environment for the immediate comfort of cheap, disposable goods and next-day delivery.
We want all the knowledge, all the connection, all the power right now, and we're willing to let the devil collect the debt later. It is the exact same wager Faust made in his dark study.
We are all signing on that dotted line. Goethe's ultimate, incredibly difficult truth is that to live fully, to truly be a participant in the human experience, is to strive. And to strive means you will make mistakes. You will cause pain. You will inevitably stand over the wreckage of your own choices at some point in your life, look at the collateral damage, and you will weep. But Goethe is begging you must not stop. Because stopping, settling for the safety of doing nothing, is the only true death.
This raises an important question, one that takes Goethe's 19th century anxieties and projects them straight into our immediate future. If our entire modern society is currently locked in a collective Faustian bargain, relentlessly pushing the boundaries of technology, of artificial intelligence, of total digital control, what happens when we actually achieve it?
What happens when we win?
Exactly. What happens when our species finally builds the ultimate machine, the perfect algorithm that anticipates our every need before we even articulate it, and we collectively look at our screens and say, "Stay, thou art so fair."
That gave me chills.
When human striving is finally completely outsourced to machines, and we no longer have to reach, struggle, or fail to get what we want, will that moment be the ultimate utopia we've been promised by Silicon Valley? Or will it be the exact second the devil finally collects his due?
That is a terrifying and brilliant thought to leave you with. Keep seeking, keep striving, and maybe take a second look at the invisible bargains you're making every single day. Thanks for joining us. Keep questioning everything. We'll catch you next time.